Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I apologize I wasn't here during your testimony, but I can only imagine it didn't escape your notice that CMS, who's not here today, even though they've been invited, actually issued a couple press releases yesterday with some ideas on how they could better facilitate stopping fraud, waste, and abuse. It's really unfortunate that they're not here to have that conversation.
Senator Heitkamp, so let me just clarify. I did speak with Administrator Verma, and she's happy to come in whenever we do a follow-up hearing on this. So she's more than willing to testify. So I just want to put that on the record. She offered to do that, and we'll certainly.
Well, is there a reason why she's not here today?
Just don't think she was prepared.
That's even more frightening than she's not here today.
From my standpoint, it didn't. I was happy to first hear the testimony from GAO and the IG, and then we will follow up on it. And again, it was a press release. I said it was a letter as a press release and as a fact sheet. And from this is going to be ongoing oversight. So
time's wasting, and so
I think we need to be clear. She was invited and declined to come, and instead of coming, issued a press release. I think that's fair, and that's what the facts are. And I think it's important to put those facts out there.
I understand, but also the fact is she's willing to come testify in the future, and it'll be in the reasonably near future.
I get it, and I voted for her, and I think that she's competent. But the bottom line is, if she wasn't prepared to testify in front of us, she shouldn't have been prepared to send out a press release. And so if I can just ask, have you had a chance, Mr. DiDardo or Mr. Ritchie, to review her statements?
My staff has, and they've briefed me on it.
And do you believe that this is a good start, a finished product, or needs some work and collaboration to try and create a network and a consistent amount of accountability for trillions of federal dollars and state dollars that are being spent so that we can avoid fraud, waste, and abuse no matter who's committing it?
Yeah, we think it's a step in the right direction, but much more is needed to be done. There are details that are not in there that I would have expected to be in there, some milestones. There's some areas not covered, like supplemental payments and demonstrations, that I would have expected to be covered in there. We have, as I mentioned, 83 recommendations that we've made to them. They've implemented 25 so far, and that plan doesn't address all of our recommendations. So there's much more needs to be done. I think there needs to be more aggressive and urgent oversight.
I think that my point that I'm getting at is that when we look at this, we need a structure. Because if we just deal with taking care of the waste, fraud, and abuse of today, there's going to be other opportunities for waste, fraud, and abuse, and we need to know who's accountable and how we're going to hold people accountable for making payments that are inappropriate, putting people on Medicaid rolls or Medicare rolls that is not appropriate. We have to get a handle on this. I don't disagree with the looming problem. And the low-hanging fruit in taking care of our health care costs on the federal government is stopping waste, fraud, and abuse. And I can tell you, when I was the Attorney General, there was this collaborative process with state attorneys general. Where did that go? What do we know about a structure that's in place, working with the state auditors, with the state inspector generals, to try and get an overall plan so that we can have meaningful accountability? The frustration that I have is that we come here and we're picking around the edges and getting distracted without really thinking about the overall structure of oversight. And, it's not acceptable that the recommendations from GAO have not been responded to. This is a big ticket item, behind national defense, and probably going to loom bigger than national defense. We've got to get ahead of this. And to me, the frustration that the American people have is that they're willing to give people some help. They're willing to recognize that, providers need to pay the bills, but they don't want this money wasted. And so, when you look at structure, Mr. DiDardo, and you think, okay, we've got these state agencies, they have responsibility as well. 50% in North Dakota of this money that's spent on Medicaid is state-based money. Where have been historically the gaps? Who have you seen on the state side do an excellent job in holding people accountable, and has the federal government learned from state audit programs on what we could do more effectively?
Yeah, well, one of the biggest gaps has been that the state auditors have not been involved on a regular basis. This is one of the points that I've made. In fact, I've brokered meetings between state auditors and CMS in order to make sure that they're brought into the program. A lot's been focused on the attorney generals and the fraud units in the states, but not the state auditors. The state auditors need to be involved much more into this program. They're willing to do it, but they need to be brought into the structure. They need to be compensated. They can have a big effect on this issue.
Well, in another place where we share revenue, in mineral management services, we have an audit program that's pretty robust to try and make sure that people are paying the appropriate royalty. There's a great example of federal-state collaboration where you know who has the lines of authority and who has oversight over those lines of authority. So it's not like we're without examples on how we could do this better. The problem that you have with AGs is that assumes automatically all fraud, waste, and abuse is criminal, or that you're going to take it criminal. Do you think there's appropriate civil penalties for fraud, waste, and abuse to provide a substantial deterrent?
Yeah, I don't know offhand to be able to answer that
Maybe
right now.
Mr.
I can give
Ritchie,
something for the record.
Maybe, Mr. Ritchie, if instead of just having to go to the very aggressive action of filing an indictment and prosecuting people versus no, don't do that, repay the money, is there an effective system of civil penalties?
Yeah, that's not my area of expertise. I do know our office works with the Mafukus who can pursue cases, and I know our office has civil remedies, civil monetary penalties and exclusions and things like that available. So I believe they can do some of that, but I could get you a better answer and consult with my colleagues and get back to you.
I think it's important that we not ignore some additional legislative tools, whether it is additional incentives to work with the states, additional incentives, and then putting together with the recommendations at HHS a robust and very clear line of authority on audit responsibility, so that we're not picking around the edges here, that we're actually creating a program that will solidify the frustration that the American public has and the frustration that we have, that we are not getting at waste, fraud, and abuse as effectively as what we should.
No, I agree. I think the other biggest gap in this whole area, and I mentioned this in my opening statement, is the managed care portion of Medicaid. The managed care contractors have not been audited on a regular basis. There's a rule now to start auditing them, but that's half of Medicaid spending. So the known overpayments right now are mostly in the fee-for-service area, and the beneficiary eligibility audits have been frozen since 2014. So there are huge gaps in knowledge about the extent of the program integrity issues in the Medicaid program, and much more needs to be done. I agree with you. We need an overall plan, and they need to be held accountable for it. And there are more resources that need to be available, including the state auditors.
And if I can just make one final comment. When you don't do those audits, you don't see the patterns in behavior that either could be deterred or they could be, in fact, prosecuted and deterred. And so that's why it's really important that these audits be current, that these audits see trend lines, and that we actually take the appropriate action to do prevention, whether it is on the benefit side, whether it's on the provider side. This is incredibly frustrating to me because it should be the most robust audit program in the Congress and in the administration, and it seems to me it's not.
Well, that's why it's been on our high-risk list since 2003. It's also why I'm here today instead of sending another GAO witness, because I'm personally concerned about the program integrity issues in Medicaid and its expected continued growth of 5.7% a year. As I mentioned earlier, that by 2025, the estimated total government spending, federal and state, on this is knocking on the door of $1 trillion a year. And it's a very important program. I agree. It's critical services that need to be delivered, but we need to get a better handle on the integrity of the program to make sure that we're not wasting money that could be better used to provide legitimate health care services.
And I appreciate so much what the IGs do and what you do, Mr. DiDardo. You guys are doing work. We hope you're just not hollering into the empty well, that someone's actually listening to you and taking your advice, and that's why we're here.
And let me clarify, because I don't want to be putting words into Administrator Verma's mouth. She was not available. Okay, about a month ago, she had to go to a child's graduation. My assumption is that when I say not prepared, not far enough along in the process to really have the testimony be all that particularly valuable at this point. Now, trust me, I wish years ago, whoever the CMS director or administrator was, further along in the process. So from my standpoint, this is progress. She's agreed to testify in the future. We're holding this hearing to define the problem, to put pressure on CMS, to come up with, okay, we got the fact sheet, we've got a little bit of a game plan. We're going to want to see more meat on the bones of that fact sheet. So this is why we do this. We do put, hopefully, cooperative pressure on the agency to finally start doing this, and it hasn't been done since 2003. So.
Mr. Chairman, if I can just say, I would be more sympathetic if she hadn't conveniently released a press release yesterday. I would be more sympathetic. I'd say, fine, she's taking this seriously. She wants to come up with a robust plan. Instead, it seems to me that what happened here was, oh, this is going to get talked about, so I need to have some talking points about this, instead of actually sitting down with us. She inherited this mess. I get that. But this has to be a priority. I talked to her about this as a priority. And so my frustration is, then don't issue a press release.
So again, I appreciate the heat you're putting on CMS. I'm putting on the same heat, okay? And so this is good. This is exactly what we should be doing. We're providing her oversight, and it'll be interesting when she does come to testify. And be a matter of, do we want it in a month? Do we want it in 2 months? You know, we'll work together with you on that.
I want a plan.
So do I.
And I want it sooner rather than later.
Right. I want a lot of meat on the bones of that plan.